Hi and welcome to my first video in this series about nutrition, and today we're going to be looking at specifically macronutrients. So these sets of videos follow the AQA AS PE syllabus from 2011, and so the first topic that comes up is nutrition, and we're going to cover carbohydrates first. So carbohydrates, or carbs for short, are formed from three elements: carbon, giving the carbo, and then the hydrate, meaning water, giving you hydrogen and oxygen. And carbohydrates yield 4 calories per gram. So for each gram of carbohydrate it releases 4 calories, and a calorie is a measurement of energy. So it's one of the main energy stores, carbohydrates, and it's what provides us with the fuel that we need for respiration. Roughly speaking, we have around 1,500 calories of energy stored as a chemical called glycogen, that's kept in our liver and in our muscles. And glycogen can get directly broken down into glucose. So if you put loads of glucose together, that can form glycogen, and glycogen is a storage molecule in humans. And there are two major types of carbohydrates. You have simple and complex. And as the name would suggest, simple carbohydrates are usually referred to as sugars, and complex might be things like starches. Essentially, simple carbohydrates can join together and form things like complex carbs. So for instance, glucose put together in a certain way can form glycogen. Also, by putting together glucose, you can form another storage molecule known as starch. And so the storage molecule for carbs in humans is glycogen, and for the storage molecule in plants is starch. So simple carbohydrates can be used very, very quickly to provide energy via respiration, and they're normally sweet in taste. So glucose is an example of a simple carb, sucrose is another, and they're found in things like fruit, honey, sweets, cakes, biscuits, jam and chocolate, so sweet tasting things. Whereas complex carbs release their energy much slower because they need to be digested and broken down, and we find those in such things as bread, rice, potatoes, pasta and vegetables. A good way to tell that complex carbs are made of simple carbohydrates is to take a piece of white bread and to chew it. Eventually the taste will become sweet, and because what you've done is you've broken down the starches found in the bread, and those have broken down into glucose. Now another type of macronutrient is proteins. The word macronutrient means a large nutrient, so macro implies large, and there are micronutrients as well, which we'll come on to in later videos. But proteins, they provide a similar amount of energy compared with carbohydrates, but they're not only used to provide energy, but they're also used for growth and repair. So anytime that you put down more muscle, or if you were to repair a tissue or some bone, then that's provided for you by proteins. The types of food that you would find it in would be things like fish, milk and meat, and specifically for vegetarians, if you don't eat meat, then your major sources of proteins will probably come from things like beans and lentils and nuts and cereals. So when proteins are broken down, they form into these other chemicals called amino acids. And so different proteins have a different amino acid structure. Now in total there are 20 amino acids. Of which 9 are essential. That means that we must get them for our food because our body doesn't make them like the other 11 non-essential amino acids. And essentially what happens when you ingest a protein is you'll break it down into its amino acids, and then you'll put those amino acids back together in a specific way that can be used to, repair a muscle or repair bone growth, or to grow in general. So of these amino acids, the essential ones are listed on the left and the non-essential on the right. Now it isn't technically required for you to know the 20 amino acids at all, just to be aware that there are different types and they're put together to form different proteins. The final macronutrient that we need to know about is fats, and fats provide at least double or over double the amount of energy pound for pound compared with carbs and proteins. In fact, 9 kilocalories compared with 4 for carbs and proteins. And they're used for slow release energy. You require oxygen to break them down because fats are essentially made of just two elements, carbon and hydrogen, and so you need the oxygen in order to oxidize it and to break it down. Now, not only are fats used to provide energy, but they're also used to provide insulation, as you're probably well aware. And so they can maintain a constant temperature within an organism. You can fit them into two groups, so saturated and unsaturated. A saturated fat is where all of the carbons have been filled up with hydrogens. An unsaturated fat is where there's a double bond between two of the carbons. Now we can roughly divide these into these two types and under these two headings. So with saturated, we can refer to them as LDLs, and unsaturated can be HDLs. The LDL and HDL actually refers to cholesterol. And you can think of it in these terms, where the LDL cholesterol is very much less healthy than the HDL. Technically, LDL stands for low density lipoprotein, HDL, high density lipoprotein. So, the saturated fats are found in things, usually animal products, so cheese, chocolate, sausages and margarine, obviously produced from milk. They're exceptionally bad for health, and so they can lead to higher levels of obesity and heart disease. In fact, what we were looking at previously, the LDL cholesterol, is the actual thing that causes the blockage within the arteries. An unsaturated fat, sometimes referred to HDLs, they can be found in things like fish, corn and nuts and soybeans. And so in the case of fish, you might have heard the phrase omega-3 mentioned, and so HDL cholesterol can actually remove the LDL cholesterol, and therefore it's seen as a benefit because it reduces rates of obesity and heart disease. If you join me next time, I'll be continuing on with micronutrients.